Welcome to This Life, the Chronicles of Autism Moms, hosted by me, Alison. Each week I'm joined by amazing women who happen to have autistic kids. Hasna, Moira, Suzana, Reen, Maha, Karina, Huma and Rana, our techie. Each week we talk about navigating the ups and downs of parenting kids with autism and how that affected us and our lives as women, mothers and professionals. Strap in, grab some tissues, sometimes you'll cry from empathy and other times from laughter. Join us on our journey of this life. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of This Life, the Chronicles of Autism Moms. I'm joined by a lovely group of ladies this morning. Good morning, everybody. We are going to be talking about the battle of about school admissions and the school admission process, our experiences of that, good and bad, how we feel things could and can improve, and recommendations that we can make. So I'll start actually today by sharing my experience, because I think all of us have had different challenges with schooling and school applications. And so my experience was a little bit unusual just for the fact that I've got one child with autism. I've got two neurotypical children. And I really felt that I wanted to keep them together because I feel like all of my children should all be going to the same school, should all be given, should be sharing that experience of the school journey, going to school, coming home from school. And it just felt right to me that I wanted to keep them together, because I think as a parent, you feel like if you split them to a point, if you can identify a school that, can offer an education, quality of education to all of them, depending on whichever level that they're at, it really feels more inclusive. I didn't want him to feel like he wasn't good enough to go to the same school as my girls, but also I didn't want my girls to see that there was so much of a difference with him and how he was going to be educated that I had to split them. So I really felt very, very strongly about the fact that I wanted them to be together. So my journey started with one school that my eldest daughter was at. So she's 2 years older than my son, who has autism. And she had started a preschool within a school that goes up to the age of 18. And actually, this is a private school, an international school in Qatar. We had really hoped that this particular school could make the accommodations for Noah at the age of 3 to go into their kind of kindergarten, like their like a nursery program. And at the same time, we were kind of looking around. I know Moira and I were looking at schools because our kids are the same age, our boys are the same age, different places. It became very apparent very quickly that the cost, because I remember the cost of this school, like the school that my daughter was already at, was expensive anyway, but we, after considering all of those options and what they could offer, it was very minimal, the support that they could provide him, because they didn't have the experience. But they offered him a place, in fairness, but that was on the proviso that we put a shadow teacher into the school. So obviously shadow teachers come at an additional cost, and then he was having, additional therapy at the same time. And it was I just felt that option wasn't quite right for him. And we had the offer of another school place for him, another international school, which was actually an American school that offered a SEN program. So a fully integrated, or what we thought was a fully integrated program at the time. This was going back years ago now, that we literally, I couldn't manage all of the school runs at the same time. We made a huge decision to move all of our children. My biggest daughter was really, really settled in the school that she was in. I just made this decision that we would move them together. My husband and I felt very, very passionate and very sure and clear about the fact that they should all go to school together. So we moved them. So I uprooted my daughter, who was in 3rd grade at the time, and asked her to leave all of her friends and go to this new school, which actually worked out well for quite a few years. But now, just last year, actually, just due to the fact that that there was quite a few situations in the school that were occurring, the SEN support had changed, that we decided to really have them go their kind of separate ways. And I've now split my girls. So I've got my girls going to the most, great school for them, which offers great opportunity for them. Really good. Everything's great about that school for my daughters, but it's just very unfortunate. It really broke my heart, actually, when we had to split them. But now Noah is in a school that is an international school, but it has a SEN unit, and it's like one of the first here to have a multidisciplinary approach. So now I've kind of gone for full circle in like this 360, whereby I've got one in one school who's absolutely thriving, and then I've got my girls in another school who are thriving. It's just that their worlds don't collide. And it was funny, I was having it wasn't funny at all. I was having a conversation with my 8-year-old the other day, and she was talking about having her friends over for a play date. And she said to me, Mummy, how is everybody going to react to Noah? They've not met Noah before, and they don't know what autism is, because sometimes I talk about my brother and having autism at school, and they don't know what it is. And what happens if they come over and they see Noah watching Peppa Pig, because Noah's 11 but loves Peppa Pig, and what happens if they ask lots of questions, and what happens if he runs up to them and gives them a kiss when they come in the door and they don't expect that? What do we do? So obviously that's part of another conversation. I think the thing that is most frustrating about it, even though all of my children's needs are being met at their separate schools, the school that is great for my girls is not having any inclusive education at all. So they don't see kids like Noah, and so they don't understand. There's no education there. There's no there's no awareness. Nothing. And that led to a very frank conversation with my 8-year-old. And, my girls are the biggest advocates for Noah. They absolutely adore him. And, he's one of the pack and he's with them. But when they are, they're becoming acutely aware that obviously there are differences with him, which is fine in our house. But it's like, how do we get people to understand, like kids of their age, when they don't see this all the time? So it's a very emotive conversation actually with her. And I think it really hit me for a couple of days. I was like, oh, I didn't even think about this. And, when you've got the baby of the family who's, coming up with questions like that, it's, we came up with a plan as to how we would do it and everything else, because obviously I want all of their friends to be welcome in our house. But it's something that I never thought about from my children's perspective. That's where we are with our school application process. We've kind of been around through the mill a bit with it. And I think that most parents in our situations will be at some point. There's a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot of crossroads to get to. Karina, I wanted to come to you first, because I think your situation is slightly unique in the fact that you've got twins, and one has autism and one does not. So I wanted to kind of pick up with you first and ask, how did you go about choosing a school? And, have you, obviously they're both together at school. Is that important for you, for them both to be at school together in the same environment? Or is it something you've ever considered kind of splitting, or had to consider? What's your experience?
We think like you, we want them together. But our journey, I think we got very lucky, because the nursery he was going to referred him to a very nice small school with the mainstream, and they had a very good SEN department at the time. Small SEN department, but his teacher happened to be a psychologist. So I said, well, this is what we hoped for, this is perfect. And he was nonverbal at the time, and he was accepted being nonverbal. So he was there for KG 1 and 2. And then from nonverbal, he left the school, and his report said that he had significant speech delays. So this report closed all the doors, you can imagine.
Yeah.
And we are not accepted.
So we'll just go back a bit, just for anyone who's listening that hasn't been through this process. So what you're saying is the disclosure of saying that a child has significant speech delays automatically closes a lot of applications to schools, because
Absolutely.
of the fact that they would not ever entertain taking a child with significant delays?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because we always chose to disclose.
Yeah.
It said we are going to disclose no matter what. But the boys are our first children. We didn't know any better. We didn't have any experience with schools or applications or anything. So our journey was, I don't like to remember, to be honest with you, because I think it was the most difficult time for us because of the lack of support we received.
Were you surprised at the lack of support that there was? Obviously, going into it to begin with, were you surprised as to, it always surprises me even now, and it's silly really, because, we've been doing this for such a long time, but it's almost like it's almost like you get less help because you've got a child that has additional needs. It's like there are more hurdles in your way because, as soon as you disclose that, as soon as you say that, then there's less help available, there's less support available. It's counterproductive. The system is not working correctly.
Yeah, I think it's everything. It's everything, because for like comparing the boys being twins, like for one, here's the application for your son, this is what we offer, everything was perfect. And the other one, no, we don't have we just don't, he's not welcome here. And no one was there to take care of me and my feelings. How is this mother feeling? What is she going through? Yeah. And this is why I start a group of moms with, moms who are going through the same process. We have a group, and I try to support as much as I can, because I know what I went through, and I don't want other mothers to go through the same thing I went. And I was like, I became depressed because I told my husband, let's leave, let's go to another country where we have better options.
I was going to say, sorry, Karina, Hasna, how does that differ in different countries? Because I know you've got a bit of a knowledge about, how the situation looks in other, in a more international setting. So obviously we are here, which is obviously quite unique, and every country is unique in the way that it offers SEN education to its children. I think that, we automatically think that there is a perfect world out there, and, maybe in other countries that it's better. So what do we think on a kind of global perspective about what the offer is?
I mean, the problem being in countries that still have not a system that is streamlined is exactly that you're at the mercy of whatever school you go to, whatever school you apply to, unless it's a public system, which was not really an option for us. But even the public system is flawed. I mean, in the US, which at this point they have the IDEA law, which really covers every bit of the educational process. So from a policy perspective, it's very good. Then it depends from state to state and also from county to county and what the resources are available. Yeah. But usually through a referral system, and that's when a diagnosis is very important. That's why you have sometimes parents that really need that diagnosis. It's not like, no, we don't want it. They need it because that opens the door for referrals. And the beauty of it is that the parents are usually, by law, very involved in that process. They're just another team member and they get a say. So if they didn't feel like an assessment was fair enough, they have the right to request another one, which is then also paid by the school district. They have the right to say, no, we don't feel like this IEP, this individual education plan is correct. Also, in that they might also not feel that this is a good fit of a school. So at that point, they have options such as bringing in an advocate, also paid by the state. So it's if parents are educated and know the laws, in the US, for example, they are very well supported. I mean, then you have that, of course, you always have the gap of how these policies are implemented. Going to Europe, for example, also there is a law that like mandates inclusivity and wants to include kids with special needs in the least restrictive possible environment. What does that mean? It means that your child needs to be mainstream as much as he or she can. As much if he can do PE and he can't do something else, there might be some pull-outs, some push-ins, whatever, but the child needs to stay in mainstream if he can. If he and all accommodations must be made possible. Now, I was saying in Europe, for example, the states can provide you a shadow teacher. Like I know growing up in Italy, for example, I know or Switzerland, there's a shadow teacher that is paid for by the state. However, the gap then is how qualified is this shadow teacher? How qualified, like you have almost like a gap in how the teachers are how the knowledge that the teachers themselves have, the training that they've received. And this is what's unraveling in these past years is really the gap in, okay, we have strong laws, but there's not enough education. But again, with the growing numbers, it's almost like something that cannot be avoided anymore. So the laws are in place. Having said that, in our case, we really are at the mercy of, let's say, our private schools, because if they can fill their admission, because they need to make also their money. So if they can fill that number, great. They are not going to take a single special ed student. Why would they pay more? Why would they bring in more? But then if not, because there's quite a lot, then they will begin to see, okay, is this, but the sad part is that it's usually always a financial process for them. It's like they want to be compassionate, but then there's like that business element that it's like, oh, it's just so much easier to close the door than open it. And I feel like each one of us in this space here have gone through that. It's like, oh, we would love to support him, but that be like, it's kind of easier to just close that door. Maybe we're not the best system for him. I love how they say it, and it's okay. Again, it's not really them. It's about there not being any policies holding them accountable, responsible, mandating that. So without policies, that's what it comes down to. We're all lost, if we have something legal to fall back on to make our fight, which it exists around the world, obviously, and I'm hoping it's on its way in other countries. Without that, we are really just fighting our own battles.
And that's the thing, I think that, Moira, I'm just asking you the question as well about this whole advocacy thing and actually fighting our own battles. And I think that we all know, as parents, we've had this conversation, I think, before about the fact that as a parent, you do have to fight a lot of battles anyway, generally. But obviously for our situation and, any kids with additional needs, then it seems that it's unfortunate and sad and quite depressing, really, the fact that we have to do more. So Moira, what is your experience of kind of advocating for your son in these kind of situations? How did it make you feel? Was it surprising to you? And, what was the journey like for you?
Well, similar to you, Alison, Callum was in nurseries. It was absolutely fine. The nurseries, actually, they weren't qualified, they weren't trained, but they dealt with him brilliantly. And then he had to progress to preschool, and they requested a shadow. And then EI came along, which was amazing.
For the early intervention,
yeah. So for 2 years, he was in a nice, safe little bubble, and so was I. And then I was into, part of me push to mainstream, or can we just stay here another year? And
that's the dilemma, isn't it? That's the mainstream or not to mainstream as well. That's the, that's a very...
And mainstream obviously is what you think is the best thing that you have to do. So every school in Doha, I knocked on their door pretty much.
How did you handle that, like Moira? How did you come up with the decision to kind of mainstream or not to mainstream him? Was that a tough one for you?
Well, we didn't have an option. He had graduated EI. It was going to possibly hold him back to stay, to be fair. And there was no special school, so it had to be mainstream.
So did you think at the time there was a kind of rosy tint on the schools that we potentially had looked at to say that they'd had, a SEND department and everything else? Did you feel like you were excited about this new opportunity? Did you think that there was a bit of a sales pitch going on as to how good the support would be?
And most of them just paid lip service to,
right,
sure, we'll do this. And then when it comes to the crunch, oh, actually, no. So I got really quite indignant to a lot of them. Like, do you mean you won't take him? Who the hell do you think you are? telling everyone, don't go to that school, it's crap, don't go there.
Did it surprise you though? Did it surprise you when you started applying what the how many schools were not open to taking him?
Was I surprised? Was I annoyed? I probably wasn't surprised. And we were prepared to pay for and provide support. That's the bit that I couldn't get. Right. And I don't run a school, I'm not a teacher, so I don't know really what else is involved, but I just thought, I'm going to pay you money for my child to be there, and I'm going to pay for a support. What else do you really need?
Yeah,
but they still
but it's not that feeling of it not being fair as well, isn't it? Huma, how do you feel about that? Because I know that you've been through a lot with the school process, and you've been on quite a long journey now that Haider's older as well. So how are your feelings and your thought when you look back at your journey with the schooling system? How does it make you feel?
Oh, this is a Pandora's box that I try to keep a lid on it, because then everything just comes out. But surprising. As
she's trying to measure herself before she speaks. Go for it, Huma.
Eldest child, no idea what it would be, what this journey would be like, and then you are surprised and shocked that the challenges that you will face from the institutions that you thought would be there to help your child, and you learning that there's a separate world for these kids, that we've been very open about our diagnosis, and we thought that's the best way to go, because that's what we were told, that if you don't disclose at the start, then later on, if the school finds out, then there will be, this is the best way to get help for your child. Anyway, but the diagnosis is just, it closes a lot of doors. Some schools, they are, I can only speak for this country. I haven't had schooling experience in any other country. And here we usually go to private schools, and there is so much demand for neurotypical kids. There's such long waiting lists in good schools that they're like, they can easily reject your child. They're like, you know what, we don't want to deal with your child right now. And it feels horrible. They're like, and I said, listen, you've just seen a paper. You haven't even met him yet. He's nothing like what he's on the paper. But they're like, you know what? No, I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do. We tried old established schools. That was a no. We tried new upcoming schools, and that was a no.
So Huma, when you were talking to these people in the school, the admissions team, or maybe a teacher, or the person that was doing the assessment, did you have this conversation with them? And what did you feel like, how did they respond to you? Were they actually having conversations with you about this? And was it over email, or was it in person? Did you?
I would always some were on the phone. Mm-hmm. We tried around like 38-40 schools. Some some rejected straight out. They were like, no, we don't have the resources, we don't have the place. So that's the standard line we would hear: we don't have the resources.
And that was without even meeting him. That was just with the piece of paper and a disclosure.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And the school that we did go to, some of them had like they were like, we don't have the they would tell us in person. Some had the courtesy to tell us in person, and then some were pretty open. They were like, listen, the laws, they don't had this school been in a different country, there were specific laws in place to protect these children, but here, I mean, there are none, as far as I know. And then so they can get away with it. So there's no one pushing them that no, you have to take this child, you have to educate this child. So we were basically at the mercy. I felt I I had no voice. My son had no voice. I was scared to defend myself, because I was like, I have no position. I have no feet. I would take anything.
And that's the thing, isn't it? You compromise. You know, how did that make you feel though, as a parent? Like that you had to, like, it sounds to me like you were having to compromise just to get him the foot in the door.
Yeah, desperate, horrible, scared, that I felt like I felt like one of those excluded refugees or something, that just throw me anything, I'll take anything. And I luckily we I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. People don't my son was expelled from his previous school. I'm not even going to say, oh, we left. No, we didn't leave. He was expelled because they were like, oh, we don't have the resources. I was like, you didn't have the resources in the first place. I was providing all the resources. What changed now? Now what changed was that they were like, oh, they just had enough. They just had enough. And, they excluded him from the class. They would make him sit in a separate room alone with the shadow teacher, and make him work, and put him on forced medication. So when I went against all of this, they were like, you know what, we don't want you anymore.
Yeah.
So
such a shame. Yeah.
And so I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because it left me traumatic. It left my child traumatized. And so we luckily we got a spot somewhere else, by luck. They were kind enough. I think that I'm honestly, we've been just on the mercy of some kind people who have shown us that, we went to the school, and they were like, yeah, sure, we'll take your child. And I was like, are you serious? Is there a catch? Is something that I don't know?
I mean, how does that make you feel though, as a parent, and, you know, as a family, that you are, you know, schooling is a right, education is a right, okay, to everyone. So how does that make you feel when you're in that situation, when you can't believe that a school will take your child? You know, I mean, in 2020 something, you know, in this day and age, that you are like grateful for somebody to take your child on.
Yeah, it's ecstatic, and I feel horrible. And I think that, listen, I can pay for my shadow teacher. There are a lot of parents who can't pay for their shadow teacher.
Yeah.
What do we do? I mean, and even now I feel schooling is like there's a sword hanging on my neck all the time. That one wrong step and you're out, miss. So it just feels stressful. My friends, they were like, oh, we used to live so close by. How come you never come out? How come you never socialize? And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to, because when my kids, they go to school, I'm stressed out. Oh, is a phone call going to happen?
You're waiting for the phone call. Yeah.
So I'm, my mind is there, and so that's the thing. I still feel I'm never at ease. I'm never at ease.
Yeah.
I still feel that these kids, like, we don't have a voice. We don't have someone backing us. We don't have someone saying that, listen, you can't kick this child out.
Right. So you're walking on thin ice. Maha, what's your experience of this? Do you have any experience of this?
Yeah, I do, unfortunately. I think, I don't even think you can plan. Like, we came from Australia to Qatar, and we flew here, I think, 2 to 3 times before we decided to move, to meet everyone at the schools and to ensure that the school would be the right fit for our son, because we wouldn't come here unless the school was on board with everything. So when we moved here and my son was just 6, the school was great. They were very, and like I said, we flew here 3 times before we decided to move, just so they could meet the boys and just so they can meet Zane. And, we did all of that. So interesting thing is, suddenly you get a change in your head of school who decides they want to take the school in a different direction. And, a few years later, they say, well, we can't support your child anymore. So even when you do everything right and you disclose everything and you support the school and you give them everything they need, they can still at any moment turn around and say, sorry, it doesn't suit us anymore. And that's just, I think it's criminal, because it's, for you as an educational facility to, rob a parent of their right for their child, or to make a mum and dad feel like they, they don't have any power, is like probably the worst thing you could do. Like, it's a form of abuse, and these educational facilities need to, or these schools need to be held accountable, because it's just disgusting. Even when we do all the right things, they can still turn around and go, you know what, we don't feel like it now. And they get away with it because, like Hasna was saying, all these policies need to come into place to make these schools accountable for what they, the decisions they've made, and then to ensure that there's a certain standard that they're meeting. So yeah, I think you just, as a mum of a special needs boy, I think you just need to be prepared for anything, even when you do everything right. Unfortunately, we just have to have the thickest skin possible just to be able to just be ready for anything. And don't forget, us as mums and with dads, it's so important for us to be so, positive and strong, and this in the home as well. Don't forget, we have to be great in the house, and then the schools are sort of beating us on this end, and we're trying to deal with our family on the other end, and you're like, my God, like, why, what fresh hell is this? Like, why beating us when we're down? Like, and most of us, like, I know everyone here in this group is more than happy to say, do you know what, I'll sell my clothes if it means I can give my child a bit more resources. I won't eat meat, I'll do whatever it takes. And we are like doing more. Like, I've not met a more amazing group of mums and dads than in the special needs community. And you see these amazing group of people being treated like this, and you're thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Like, how do you sleep at night? So it is challenging. In saying that, though, you meet some incredible teachers that will go out of their way, and unfortunately those teachers don't have the power that you wish they did, because they're looking at you like, I wish I could do so much more, and I can't because the system doesn't allow me to, or the culture of the school won't allow me to do any more for your child. So you've got these great teachers that are sort of stuck as well, like looking at you thinking, there isn't much more I can do as a teacher. And unfortunately, these decisions are usually made by upper management that most of them don't have much to do sometimes with the families directly. So yeah, I'd just say just be ready for anything, really.
How did you explain to your son Maha when you needed to change schools? Like, how did you break that to him? Because obviously he's aware that he needed to change schools, and I would imagine that there had to be a conversation, especially with him, because he needs to know what's going on. So it's very important for him.
Amazing. He had his crew. He had these amazing friends, and these friends did more than what the teachers did. He had friends that just managed, helped him so much. So didn't really need to do much in terms of resources because he had this amazing group of friends. So for me to tell him, he was about to go into middle school. So it was sort of a good time for me to sell him the idea that, this is a time that we need to change because the school's going to get larger and there's going to be more kids in the class. And I sort of had to wrap it up like, we're doing this for you and we need to try this new school. And so I found this great school. Hopefully it stays great. I say that about all schools my children attend until, a few years go by. So lucky for me, I don't know how he was able to just cope quite well with it. I think selling him the idea that, look, it's a smaller school and you've got less kids in the class, and it was just a more tight-knit community. And I think for him, that didn't sound so bad. I was similar to most of you as well. You definitely, Alison, where I wanted to keep my kids together and I had to make the decision to separate them. And so I've got, one in one school, one in another school. But I think it was just, I don't know, grace of God, I don't know. It was luck for me that my son was able to transition at age 11, he was at the time, to a new school, and he's really happy there now. So for now,
so you think it kind of worked out for the best after that? Yeah,
work out for the best, but the way the school managed it was just nothing less than disgusting, I would say. Like, they could have made that so much easier for me, and for you to have a discussion, like, I'm quite open-minded, for you to have a discussion with me saying, we need to look at this for your son and we need to think about his future. I'm open to that. I actually encourage that because I need to know what I'm Yeah. So that conversation is fine, but the way it was done was just, it was. I don't know how these people sleep at night most days. Right. I just think, how do you even have children yourselves? You probably shouldn't be parents. But no, I think it was in looking back, it was in the best. But again, they didn't help me make that transition. It was, you amazing group of ladies plus my tenacity that made me go and look at every school and basically go,
I think that's one of the core pillars of that school as well, is tenacity. But anyway, okay. Reen, coming on to you, obviously you've got 3 kids as well, and should your kids all be in the same school? Would you like that as an option? Or, I know that they're not in the same school, but tell us about your decision and how that kind of came about. Was that a kind of active decision, or something that you were kind of pushed into?
Basically, we started off with all 3 kids in the same school, and then we moved the kids, and it's in the same school. But we figured that it was a personal choice to move my youngest somewhere else, because I think she would thrive where she is right now. But Mikhail, on the other hand, is actually fine going on his own. We said, if we moved your other sibling, my younger son, which is just 1 year older, will you be fine in the school alone? He says, yeah, because he has developed his own personality, and he wants to be an individual. He wants to be known as Mikhail. I'm not Mikhail, the brother of Ryan. I'm not Mikhail. I am just Mikhail. And the thing is that he, because when he was in KG, we decided to keep him 1 year behind. We didn't let him move to grade 1 because we knew that he wasn't socially and emotionally ready, matured enough to move a grade above. And the school was considered and so that was a good step for him. So he has remained in the same level, and he's grown up in the same level with his younger brother. So over time, he realized that, hey, I'm the older one. I'm the elder one. I am an individual myself, so I shouldn't be associated with, having a twin or having a younger brother. And he likes to be an individual himself. But our process in getting into school was just similar, like Huma, like Maha, like everyone else. It was tough. It was not easy. When we decided on a school for Mikhail, to move him from nursery to school, it was the list was very limited, because we knew that all other schools are not going to take him. It was probably like 3 schools on the list out of the schools that we have in Qatar. And we were sold to this school because it had a sense of community. It had, all the feels like, it's inclusive. We'll have you. But when we got in, and when they realized that this is the child, they're like, oh, you didn't disclose anything to us. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I submitted everything. Oh, there's nothing on file. And we're like, are you serious? That's like, you don't have any of it's like 1 piece sheet in his file, which is his application form. I'm like, no way. I've submitted a whole stack. And I spoke to your admission person. We had a conversation at back then Ramada Hotel, and we've laid out everything, and she met him. And now you're saying that, you don't know this boy, you don't have a clue. And then they started to impose a lot of things on him. There's one day when they called us up, I don't think you should bring him to school tomorrow because we're having an opening ceremony, and there's going to be a lot of people, and I think he should stay at home.
Wow.
So
shocking.
I'm like, how can you do that?
There's somebody behind all of this, that doesn't understand, just has no consideration or thought for
Oh no, but this person actually apparently has someone in her family that is.
They always do, Reen.
They always say that. Yeah.
Understands. It's like,
So,
I know, I understand. I understand how you're feeling. No, and this is
My
wrong.
cousin has, or my
exactly.
nephew.
Someone
not until today.
friend.
That just makes me so. Every time I think about it, it just gets me so angry.
Yeah.
How can you call me out and say that you can't let my son go to school? You don't.
But maybe
you
if they had a
office and we
physical
discuss.
disability, there would be no question of anybody doing that, because they know fundamentally that is wrong. So it is discrimination ultimately at the end of the day, but it's a different type of discrimination, and because it's not outwardly visible, then they feel that they can do that. But it's still the same. It is effectively discrimination. Suzana, what are your thoughts on this conversation? And what was your
conversation?
the process that you went through to get your son into school? Because I think you were kind of doing that at the same time as we were, but also, your thoughts on moving him out of the school that he's in. Are you thinking of changing, or are you still kind of happy with the school that you're in? And what are the do you need to jump through any hoops to kind of move him on if you needed to?
Yeah. So admission wise, from the very beginning, we had just finished EI. We did it for a few months. And at that point, I was calling up schools, and I didn't even think about, like, should I disclose or not? I remember my husband was kind of like, well, you don't really need to do that. But I remember actually reading on some schools' applications where it would say something like, if you have any kind of disability or situation, you need to disclose. And if not, like, it's grounds for them to, at one point, maybe expel, or they just can't take any kind of children with disabilities. So for me, it's not only about that. I just kind of felt like I wanted him to be in the right space with the right resources and people who actually know how to help him. I did not want to put him in just any school just because I had no other choice and use that as a babysitter. And I want to kind of highlight, and I know I've mentioned this in previous episodes, that it's a spectrum for a reason. So I remember at that time just calling up schools because I didn't want to go through the whole application process and take all that time and pay all these different schools' admissions fees while they might just tell me no. And actually, I got no's over the phone without even applying. And my son, he's so mild on the spectrum. Like, they don't even offer to meet the child. Like, I'm not saying that children who have milder symptoms.
I know what you're saying. I know, but they still need support in some ways.
They do need some kind of support. And especially
it's almost like
they
fall through the cracks as well.
Yeah, and that's why I like to mention it often, because they definitely, I feel like if I haven't, especially early on, been always involved and on top of things, there is so much that could have fallen under the cracks. And I've supported in so many ways. However, I'm still sure there are things that do fall through the cracks. And it's very infuriating, to be honest, because, I like the school we're in. I feel compared to like everyone's stories, I kind of was generally lucky, although I got tons of no's over the phone without even having to apply or anyone seeing him. I, at that time, worked for just like about a month in a school that was opening up, and they had planned to have a SEND department in place, but they didn't have their details, protocols, policies worked out yet. And so that was one of the schools that I applied to because I knew they had a SEND department. And there was one other school. And I think the reason as well at that time, like, first of all, I only have one son. I have never been through the process. So it's not like we had siblings. In any case, as any parent trying to get in a school, it's kind of like, I don't want to say a hit and miss, but it's hard to come to that decision just because you don't know and you don't have the experience in the first place. But also, I remember in the country at that time, there was a huge demand on schools. They had waiting lists for days, and it was just like hard for anyone in general to get into specific schools. So like on top of that, then there's you know, him being on the spectrum. And so basically I applied to 2 schools that had SEND departments in place. One of them was a new one. And the one that was already set up and open was a very nice experience at that time for me, just to go in for the interview or whatever they call it. I remember going in and I was so worried. Like, what would Victor do? What's an interview like? What are they going to ask? What if he, I don't know, misbehaves? Like, what are they looking at? I didn't know. And I remember
you're feeling like it's more of an interview for you and for him. Like
I was terrified.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what we're going
on your
into.
best behavior.
And so I was like, I hope he behaves, you know, whatever. And I remember, like, when we finished the interview and the lady left, I was just like, oh my goodness, like it's almost like he was like the perfect angel. I was like, where did this boy come from? You know,
he knew there was a lot riding
on it. He was like, so I don't think he knew anything. He was just kind of like, he was like 4 at the time, I think. But yeah, it was really funny. He just kind of, you know, breezed through it. She asked questions, he answered, he played.
But Reen, Suzana, how does that make you feel looking back on that now? I mean, I think that we're all so desperate that we want our child. I mean, you know, asking any 4-year-old child to be like, oh, you know, hoping and praying that he behaves, and like, what is behave for a 4-year-old anyway? Like, do you know what I mean? In that sort of setting.
I mean, honestly, it's not like
it's like what, you know, what are we as parents? You know, it's hard enough for a 4-year-old child anyway to be in that kind of setting. You know, there's play assessments and everything else for schools, but being a parent and being under that, I mean, the pressure, how did you feel about that? You know,
I was honestly stressed out because I knew I didn't have that many options. It's not like I could go, you know, and apply to other schools. I literally like had these 2 options that had a SEND department at the time, and that were kind of somewhat new and had space to take people. So that this interview that I told you about, we breezed through it. He did perfectly fine. And she said he did amazing. And because they had a system set up in place, she even said he didn't need a shadow teacher. And because they had certain things set up in place, and he would be totally fine. And I was like, yes. The problem with this school was that it was like an hour or so away from where we lived, and the roads weren't the best to get there. My other option was the other school that I mentioned that I worked with for a very brief period of time. It was a little bit closer, 45 minutes. So yeah, honestly, the decision to choose between these two schools in the end was my husband's, because he's like, I'm not driving and letting you guys go an hour or more just one way every day.
It was
and I was just like, okay, fine. There are 2 different systems. One was an American system, one was a British system. Not that I knew really much the difference, but the school he's actually at, so when we were doing the whole admission process, they because they had a SEND department, then all of a sudden a lot of, you know, people were like, yes, thank God. And everyone that had a SEND situation was applying there. Mm-hmm. And I think the school got overwhelmed because they didn't realize, you know, that there's that much demand for it. And although they wanted to help, I feel like they didn't have their policies in place yet. And they didn't want to maybe take something that they weren't sure of. So then they hired basically someone from a different country, so totally objective, to kind of be there in the assessments for the kids. And that lady, after assessing Victor, said that he's doing really well. She said he doesn't really need a shadow or anything if he's with the right teachers and in the right environment. However, having said that, this school is new. You don't know how that's going to go. So just to be kind of like on the safer side, the school wants him to have a shadow teacher. And again, this is another thing I kind of feel a little bit lucky with. I wouldn't have had the first knowledge on how to find someone, how to hire someone, if they're qualified. And I'm so glad that the school they decided their system was, They will find the teachers, they will hire them. You just have to pay for it. And it's probably more expensive than if I had to do it myself. But they're hiring teachers, like proper, teachers who have background in supporting children with needs. So, I mean, again, there's that extra cost that you're not expecting, which is crazy, but it was just one of these situations.
And it was a means to an end. It's a has-to situation, isn't it? Thank
Yeah.
you, Suzana. Right, ladies, so we're going to do something a little bit different today. So we're going to do, I think this is such an emotive topic for all of us. And obviously, a lot of our situations are unique because we are where we are. But I think it'll be really interesting. We go around the room and just each one of you, just give us, start with Hasna, your kind of advice, maybe a top tip and something that you can share that you think is good advice for parents that are kind of going through the same sort of things, whether or not it's mainstream or special education, whether or not you want an integration. So Hasna, starting with you, what's your top tip?
I think I always say educate yourself on where you are, what the rights are, what your child needs, and what the school policies. When you're researching a school, make sure that actually it's not just about getting your child in. It's rather about it's more about the school meeting your child's need. If you go with that, I know that we are very limited in our options. So sometimes you just want your child in school, and we know there's a lot of people that don't have their child in school. So my advice is do your research, your due diligence before going into this.
Okay. Karina, any last thoughts from you or top tips?
Yes. Although the options are limited here, my message is you'll find a place. There will be a school that is a fit for your child, but look after yourself, and because you need to be strong for your child. But there will be a place. You always find a place.
Yeah, good advice. Maha.
Okay, yeah. Look, my advice would be that don't take a lot of the information you'll get from some of these teachers and schools offered by people without any educational background in SEN or anything. So for a school to say, your child, I had this lovely sentence, your child does not fit into the cohort of the students we have here. This is just limited by all they know. So just because they say that doesn't mean they won't. It's just limited by a lot of these schools and a lot of these teachers have zero background yet make explosive claims about your child. So always remember that and always go with the people that know what they're talking about and yourself, obviously your intuition, but never feel like just because a school has not accepted your child, that there's, something really wrong or bad, or, your child is not worth it. No, because chances are the decision was made by people who don't have the experience, full stop.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Huma.
Like Hasna said, do your research, do your homework, and you're the best advocate for your child, and just don't get disheartened, keep trying. You just need one school. There will be a school that'll open doors for your child, and it's a long journey, and it's, even if things don't go according to plan, at one point we were even considering homeschooling. So, sometimes things can be a blessing in disguise. So it's okay. Just don't be like depressed about it. Just, make the best of the situation, but just fight for your child. He or she has the right to be in an educational environment.
Thanks, Huma. Moira?
Yeah, I think it's so tricky to find somewhere, but even when you do find somewhere that on paper is great and you're happy and the child's happy, I think you still need to stay quite involved with what they're doing.
Keep an eye on what's happening.
Because things change, and you just need to keep on top of whatever situation you're in. Really make sure it remains the best place for your child.
Right, Names. That's very good advice. I think that we can probably all agree with that because things do change. Suzana?
You just took it out of my mouth. I was just going to say you need to kind of stay involved and keep fighting, because sometimes there are little things that schools don't notice or just kind of think are, I mean, they might be normal, but things that they don't really understand how your son or daughter are functioning the way they are. And I remember early on, if I wasn't really involved with so much and always kind of like in the school with the teachers, trying to understand, like I kind of was thinking of a situation back to what Reen was saying about the opening ceremony. I remember when our school opened and we had the opening ceremony, because it was kind of like a huge press thing. Some ambassadors were there, the owner of the school. It was like a big media situation where they had this full-on show. I remember there was some nervousness from the school's end on, you know, they didn't actually tell me like, oh, we're worried about what Victor would do, but they were just kind of like feeling a little bit anxious that he, you know, it's a lot of people, he might not feel comfortable. And I actually went in for quite a few sessions while they were doing their practices at school, because his biggest reaction was always when his dad and I would get there. So we worked behaviorally with that, with him, for him not to, you know, do any scene and not to run off or try to come to us and all of that. So I just will second what Moira said again with like, keep, you know, stay involved. There are things that you'll pick up. And I was the one who came up with the solution for that. It wasn't really from like the schools.
Always
and
the parents.
Yeah. So yeah, just stay involved and you know your kid best.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thanks, Suzana. And Reen, final thoughts.
I would say is that, like everybody said, you know, you have to be on top of things. You have to be constantly involved in the, you know, in his life in school, and you need to educate that. You have to take the initiative to educate the teachers, and you know, like we do every year before school opens, we sit in with all the teachers. We're like, especially they're new. Okay, this is because, you know, I would always request for a meeting before, and they always do it last minute. And then, you know, and I would expect them, you know, the previous teachers to actually talk to the new teachers about that, but that doesn't really happen.
It never happens.
So you need to, we always sit in, so I usually sit in with the teachers, with his therapist and his psychologist, and we're like, okay, this is Mikhail. This is what he likes. And now Mikhail will give his input. I want the teachers to know that I like this, and that, you know, take this out. I don't want them to know this. So he creates his plan with us to convey to the teachers, like, okay, this is him. This is what he likes. This is what he needs. And they need to understand that. So they need to be aware. So they're able to accommodate that in the class. It's not so much. It's just a little bit tweaks and here and there, which, you know, at the end of the day benefits everyone as well. So educating the teachers, and so far his middle school teachers have been amazing. They've really accommodated his needs, and you know, some of them write to me quite often with his progress, and that's just been, so far we've been lucky the past 3 years, him being in middle school. Yeah.
But you think that organizing that situation and conveying those messages and communicating from your side has helped, which is great advice as well. Thank you, Reen. Okay, well, thank you all for joining. We're going to wrap up now. Thank you for joining us for this live podcast brought to you by Learn Autism. To learn more about autism and the topics that we're talking about, please check out our website at www.learnautism.com. You can find this podcast where you download your favorite ones. Please make sure to give us a rating, and you can also find us on Instagram. Please click the link below. Please be sure to follow us and turn on your notifications so you can hear about all of the next episodes. And if you've got any feedback, comments, or any topics that you'd like us to talk about, please do. And you can also watch this podcast on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/learnautism. And we will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us.